Good evening, and welcome to tonight's program. I'm Rhoda McKenzie, a member of the Keese School Curriculum Committee, and I want to thank you for leaving rows A and G for people with rollators and wheelchairs. So that seems to be working. And I want to remind you to turn off your cell phones or other devices before we begin. Tonight we're going to hear a fascinating story based on declassified and publicly available sources about a specially designed ship, the Hughes Glomar Explorer, one of the most complex and expensive intelligence operations of the Cold War. Despite the endless technical and political challenges, the project successfully recovered a portion of a Soviet submarine, providing valuable intelligence on Soviet strategic capabilities. Our speaker is our friend and fellow resident at Asbury, George Stosur, and he's a retired geologist and petroleum engineer. He has delivered more than 350 lectures in some 35 countries and has been a guest speaker on cruise ships, as well as here at Asbury. His career spanned two major oil companies and the U.S. government service in science research and administration. He holds 2 MS degrees and a PhD, and he has served as president of the Computer Club, and he was dean of the Keese School. So let's welcome George Stosur.
Thank you, Rhoda, and good evening. Can you hear me all right, or does it need to be adjusted? Can you hear me all right? Yes?
Jesse, turn it up.
Jesse, that's better. I can hear myself now. Good evening. I think I do have an interesting talk. I hope you enjoy it. And there will be a test at the end of it, so don't go to sleep. So this is about recovering of... As Rhoda mentioned, this is about recovering of a Soviet nuclear-armed submarine from a very deep waters in the Pacific. It's always popular, and I think you'll learn quite a bit. You probably know a lot about it already. So let's go ahead. I think I'll skip that one. And I'll start on this side here. So the presentation is going to be in 3 parts, actually, 3 separate parts. And it's all about CIA teaming up with billionaire Howard Hughes, who I'm sure everybody heard about. It was a top secret operation during the Cold War. And Howard Hughes, who you see on the left side, served as an excuse for CIA to mine deep ocean floor for minerals, manganese nodules. The second part is about the operation itself, which was top secret, and still much of the information is classified. And finally, the end of life of Mr. Hughes, which is as dramatic as it can be. But I don't want to get it myself, so let's go ahead. So this is the first part of the 3. As a boy, Howard Hughes was a prodigy, really very capable and very smart, maybe like Elon Musk nowadays. He was constantly tinkering with various engines and electrical devices. I put the font is large so you can see well, and you should try to read it too, because I will be going pretty fast. When he was 11 years old, he built his first radio transmitter in Houston, and only at 12, he was the first boy in Houston to build a so-called motorized bicycle from his father's engine parts. he just had the ability mechanical ability to do things like that. When he grew up, dashing, 6'4", very handsome guy, he inherited his father's drill bit company. And as I mentioned, he was a brilliant engineer, studied at Rice and Caltech. He became billionaire very quickly. He was also aviator, a very accomplished aviator. He produced 21 films, I think 25 films at the age of 21. All of them were B-grade movies, but he produced many of them. Designed and flew his own aircraft and broke several world speed records, for instance. So he was quite some guy. As a senior citizen, that would be my third part, he controlled his vast business from sealed hotel suites in Las Vegas. He was shunned publicity, he became a recluse, and he became a reason for endless speculations because he was so secretive about everything. That's one of the reasons why he was a good ruse for retrieving the submarine, Russian submarine, because he was unpredictable, brilliant, and just a perfect excuse. He ended up in a very bad way. As you can see here in the picture, he was germophobic. Instead of shoes, he used Kleenex boxes and things like that. I'll tell you more about it. It's very unusual, and that's why I'm pointing this out. Am I in the way? Can you see? Maybe you can move over here. He made very many innovations, and he had some flops as well. Did you know that he designed and produced first landing gear, for instance? That was one of his inventions. He broke several aviation records, speed records and other records. He directed and financed many movies, not that they were very good. His biggest flop was building the so-called Spruce Goose, and I will tell you more about it in a while too. He got Congressional Gold Medal in 1939, and he was one of the 51 heroes of aviation and got a ticker tape parade in New York City. So he was not an average guy. He inherited his fortune from his father, but he also made fortune by designing and patenting, that's important, a drill bit for hard rocks. And this drill bit is even used today for drilling for oil and gas. The same design, very successful. He founded Hughes Tools Oil Company in 1929, and okay, I already said that. Hughes aircraft and Hughes helicopters were worth $5.5 billion when sold after his death. And he owned also 78% of TWA Airlines. I used to fly on TWA Airlines so many times, really maybe 100 times. It's amazing. So it's kind of coincidence, of course. He had two obsessions, and I'll cover both of them very briefly. Movie making was one of them. He was a dashing figure and dated about 10 actresses. He made about 25 movies. Best known are The Outlaw, The Hells Angels, and 2 Arabian Nights, for which actually got an Oscar. Unusual. And in connection with this slide, I'll show you this one also. He dated these 10 actresses, and 2 of them married him, Jean Peters and Ella Rice. She's connected with Rice University in Houston, a socialite, a very famous socialite at the time. But now, I think it's Ella Rice, his last wife, who said the famous and often quoted thing about Howard Hughes. I don't think Howard could love anything unless it had a motor in it. Cute. Now, this is especially for the ladies here, and there are a lot of ladies. And it's an absolutely true story. Nothing is made up. He invented so-called outlaw bra for the movie Outlaw. And it was, Ella Rice used, Russell, it was Russell that he built it for. She called it a ridiculous contraption. It was painful, and she secretly wore her own bra during the movies anyway. And now it's in the Hollywood Museum in Hollywood. But the even interesting thing is that this underwire bra accounted for 60% of the UK English bra market in 1990s. It was that popular. Thought you would like it. Second obsession was flying, and he founded Hughes Aircraft in late 20s, made several speed records, and of course he also, he built the largest plane ever, the Spruce, not ever, at that time, Spruce Goose. It had 8 prop engines. It flew only once and only 1 mile, and never again. There was on the contract for U.S. government. He said, I fulfilled my contract. I built a plane, and I even flew in it. So that's the end of it. And it was, Spruce Goose was really intended for transatlantic transport of men and materials during the war, because this was just before the World War II started. And Hughes Craft is now producing satellites and missiles in very high security places. So here's what Spruce Goose looked like. It was designed to carry 750 troops. That's how big it was. And to show you how big it was, these are the engines, the 8 engines on both sides. And here you see in the middle a group of 6 people. Compare their height to the whole Spruce Goose. It was a monstrous airplane. And okay, now we're going to get to the second part of operation, which is the core of my presentation. And because of that, I'm going to try to bother this side of people. I can obscure the radio. And it was of course, the operation needed a cover, and to recover that Soviet nuclear-tipped submarine. And see, I used Howard Hughes because he was so secretive, so unpredictable, so rich, and with so much technical expertise. And most of all, he was very eccentric. He never could, just like Elon Musk. Sorry, I used his name. So the perfect ruse was use him as a cover to mine deep sea ocean for minerals. And I want to tell you that all the information in this presentation is declassified now and available from public sources, just in case I wonder where I got the information from. And this is the first page of a rather large report written by CIA, which was declassified in 2010. I have a separate slide with just this part here, because it describes the operation so well, I think. So here is what it says. Despite widespread media publicity in 1975, almost all aspects of the Hughes Glomar Explorer, which was a code name for the ship project, are still classified. And it is important that they remain so. The widespread publicity has contained much fact. I cannot read it from here, and extensive error. It is to protect source and methods which may face in the future. So you may not have read document, and you shouldn't even try. It's technical, and it's pretty hard to read, really. A little background. The whole thing, operation, was called Project Azorian. It was the most complex and expensive intelligence operations during the Cold War. And today it would cost about $5.1 billion. And the aim was to retrieve valuable intelligence, find out how they build their submarines, some maybe recover nuclear missiles. There were 3 of them, ballistic missiles at that too. Cryptographic materials, kind of like Enigma machines, that's very important, and operational manuals. Basically, if successful, U.S. would have, it's a bonanza, really. So much information about Soviet's capabilities. So in 1968, Soviet submarine sunk, as you already know, near Hawaii in 3, actually slightly deeper than 3-mile water, very deep, for very, very deep. And Soviets searched the area for 2 months and failed. 2 months. Actually, a little more than 2 months. I think it was 70 days or something. And they were confident the U.S. would never find it. I will tell you more about it because it's a very interesting story too. But 6 years later, CIA hired Howard Hughes, which you already know, and he lifted, not he, but under his name, CIA lifted the sub with the greatest secrecy, utmost secrecy. So the sub killed 98 Russians, Soviets. The Soviets kept the tragedy secret from its citizens for 6 years. They wouldn't admit they lost the submarine for 6 years. And I'll tell you why later on. They searched for 2 months, slightly longer than that, and gave up, confident that there's no way anybody can do anything about it. They had, I think, I have it later on, they had 60 ships or so looking for it and gave up finally. US Navy found it in 2 weeks only and launched a project to raise it in August '74. Later on, I'll also talk. What happened is that US had a grid of lines in the Pacific, acoustic lines, and actually they recovered. They found out when it happened and roughly where. They had much better capabilities than that, the Russians did. So US Navy finds it eventually. US Navy tracked K-29 in a journey through a sophisticated subsea acoustic surveillance network. I told you that already. This is not the real thing, but you see, this is a blip which guided them to the location and time of the explosion. Soviet Pacific Fleet examined entire route for 70 days, a little bit more than 2 months. And they used 36 ships to try to find their own submarine. They even took water samples for radioactivity, thinking that they might find out roughly where the submarine sunk because it carried nuclear weapons. Glomar took 22,000 close-up for 22,000 pictures. They had to know exactly where it was and how it was positioned to be able to reach that submarine and lift it. The whole thing, okay, so they used the towed fish, and the whole equipment weighed 2 tons. It's a collection of cameras of various kinds and strobe lights and sonar and things like that. The operation was recommended by Kissinger himself and approved by Nixon. Also involved Ford, Snowcroft, and Rumsfeld. I'm sure you know about, you know all the names in the government. So they've recovered, CIA recovered a portion of the submarine, but 2/3 fell back to the ocean when they roughly in the middle between the floor and the ship. And what was recovered, it's still classified. Not everything was declassified. And I have no access to that information. However, the information may be in Mar-a-Lago, who knows? The 6 Soviet sailors were buried at sea with honors. And so this is what it looked like. This is the very submarine that was crushed and retrieved, K-127, 129, I'm sorry. And this is a Glomar Explorer, built specifically for the purpose, not just a common ship. Took 6 years to build it, if I recall correctly. And it got a helipad here, of course, and this is like a drilling rig. You had to use, this is so much to explain, but it's interesting, they used a steel pipe that was only 1 inch diameter of special steel because it had to be flexible as the tides move, you know, and position had to be exactly in the same place to be able to reach it, grab it, and bring it up. So the bottom of the ship here is what is really interesting because the ship was empty inside. It had a huge cavern for the purpose of that submarines to be lifted. The door would close, and the ship could sail away and examine all those nuclear weapons or whatever. But I'll tell you more about that in a while. A giant mechanical claws were used to grab the submarine. And this is capture vehicle. If the ship weighed 2,000 tons, this weighed about 10,000 tons. So it was not that heavy in water, of course. And so it was designed to designed to be lowered to ocean floor, grasp the submarine, and bring it to ship's hold, which was right there underneath the ship. The tricky thing is that the ship had to be in exactly precise position. It could not move laterally or vertically. That's why the special pipe was built for that purpose, so it would be somewhat flexible, not brittle, because nothing would work if you try to use brittle steel. This is wrong. I translated kilometers to miles, and I forgot to say that this is 3 miles below ocean floor. Okay, so let's move on. This is a capture vehicle. You see, it's got huge pods here, 4 of them on the side, weighs about 10 tons. And these are the claws, giant claws that would grasp the submarine and bring it up. And this is the steel, flexible kind of steel that was designed for that purpose. Just to show you what monumental operation that was. Do you know what this is just one of the bearings, ball bearings that Glomar Explorer claws used in the claw system. But compare the size of a man to this. Because ball bearings are used for every kitchen appliance as well as something like that. But this, unimaginable to the sizes. I could not believe it, really. CIA reconstructed a model after taking 20,000 pictures, they reconstructed the model. I don't think it was in Langley, somewhere else. This is a wreck, and apparently it was made with very great precision, so they would know what to reach for, how to grab it, and so forth. I want to spend some time on this one because this is very important. You see a map here. On the right side, you see United States and China and Canada. And on the left side, you see Russia. And this is Japan, of course. And this is Kamchatka Peninsula and the town of Petropavlovsk, in which we actually were. We were one of the first people to be able to visit Petropavlovsk because it was a city that was not even on a Russian map for a couple of 2 or 3 decades. It was so secret. It's open now, of course, even to tourists. So the Russians, Soviets have had and still have a huge submarine base for the whole of Pacific. And the submarine started here and traveled like that, and it disappeared. Apparently, it was heading toward Hawaii. And if Dave Reiser is here, he would tell you more about that because he served on the submarine. But apparently, every few days or every few weeks, they were sending some signals to the base to confirm where they are exactly. And the base did not receive the signal for a long time, so finally they decided it must be lost. And it was. And of course, Glomar explorers starting in Long Beach and arrived at this place here. And this is where the operation took place. The water depth was 3,000 feet, slightly more than that. I find it very interesting because I'm kind of a map person. Petropavlovsk, nothing to say, it's just a regular town, really. A huge volcanic activity on all of Kamchatka Peninsula. But I took this picture here, and it's a fixture, and because it's a Lenin, and it's gargantuan, just like everything Russia builds is maybe low quality, but big. And again, compared to the people. Lots of people were there. So what you see on the right side is the result, kind of a schematic picture of the sunken submarine at the bottom. You see it's crumpled. Apparently it hit kind of vertically and got crushed, squished. Okay, 2000, yes, 2000, I told you that already. They used specialized optical lenses, which apparently was quite some time, quite a feat to build special lenses to, and I don't know too much about that, and strobes. And the result was 2 mm resolution. You know, that's the thickness of my thumb. How can you take a picture with such resolution in 3 miles deep in the water? It's amazing. Anyway, 3 armed submarines. The sub could, and that is also very interesting. You can see how dangerous the submarine was. The sub could fire 1 megaton nuclear warhead from submerged position at a target 700 miles away. So they could fire it from near Hawaii to the west coast. But what's interesting is that when you compare this nuclear weapon to Hiroshima weapon, they carried 3 nuclear submarines, each one of them 765 times bigger than the bomb we dropped on Hiroshima. 65 times bigger, one of them. I find that also pretty amazing. And this one shows you the ship here, the moon bay, they called it. Actually, they had doors. This door here like this, and this door like here. They opened the door for this contraption here to come up, close the door, and sail away. I think I have another picture like that. This is what the Glomar Explorer looked like, very much like a contemporary drilling rig that they drill for oil and gas, unless you really study it very carefully. And this is the moon bay, the guts of the ship. Again, so you're looking at, I have to explain it somewhat. This whole thing here is an opening in the center of the ship. And there are doors somewhere here which open up this way, and doors somewhere open up this way. And then the submarine is brought inside, as I described it, the door closes, and nobody can see anything. The whole point is that the whole operation is invisible to the eyes, even satellites. Nobody knows what's happening, and nobody knew what was happening. It was a top secret. that's for pretty much for my consumption. Those submarines, I've never been on one or saw one nearby, but they are absolutely huge, far bigger than I ever anticipated. This is one of Russian submarines, and 3 of them, by the way, sunk. And you compare again the person that is sitting in the tower here with the size of the submarine. I have one more picture here. They're all from Russian pages. The Russians are bragging about that, how powerful they are. So this is one of the submarines, how large they are compared to everything else here. And here's another one, and compare the size of the people here to the whole thing. And the one at the bottom, see again, you have somebody standing on the tower here. And this is a sister's submarine to K-129, whatever it was. The point of it is that they're just gargantuan, far greater than I expected. Okay, perfect cover. It was, the whole operation was ostensibly a commercial deep-sea mining project owned by eccentric billionaire, which was an excellent cover, to mine deep ocean minerals. They're called manganese nodules. They're little balls the size of my fingernail to orange or grapefruit. And they are very rich in certain minerals, very expensive minerals, specifically manganese, nickel, copper, and cobalt. And there's some commercial operation going on. A lot of people are frowning on that because it disturbs the life deep in the ocean, and you know, environmentally it may not be all that sound. So this is what it looks like if you take a picture, those manganese nodules. Smaller, about the size of grapefruit or something. If you cut one of them, it looks like this. And CIA purposefully fed media with false stories. And they've done a very good job at that because media enthusiastically popularized the mining for minerals rather than, of course, searching for that submarine. So The Economist, for instance, which is a very good English weekly, titled one big article, "The Race is On to Exploit Mineral Riches that Lie in a Deep Ocean." So they believe the propaganda from CIA. New Scientist said the ship has enough capacity to suck up 5,000 tons of ore per day. Okay. Russians were shadowing Glomar Explorer, just like American submarines and ships shadow Russian ships, of course. Soviet sailors picked up trash bags that were tossed overboard deliberately by crew on Global Explorer, probably with false information too. So the Russians collected the garbage and, oh yeah, they are mining for minerals. There were some bizarre exchanges between the Soviets and Americans, including mooning. I didn't even know what the word mooning meant until recently. Okay, so there were some hypotheses why the Soviet submarine sunk, and one of them was that a hydrogen gas explosion occurred in batteries while charging. Another one was undersea collision with US swordfish, and swordfish was indeed in that area, shadowing the Russian submarine. A leaking missile door seal, like they must have determined that maybe from what they recovered, or K-129 exceeding normal operating procedures. 40 of Soviet 98 crew that died were new to that particular submarine, so maybe they didn't know what they were doing very well. There was another theory that is not very likely, is that that submarine had a mutiny on a ship and they deliberately took a different route altogether. That's why they were not sending signals to the base. And Russians couldn't figure out exactly where it disappeared. But CIA had this system to find out about that. Do you know about Jack Anderson? Have you heard of him? Why am I doing it? Why am I telling about it? Why am I here? He was an investigative reporter, and he broke the story on the national TV at that, asserting that Navy experts had told him of it. He also claimed that taxpayers' money paid for the whole operation and was not worth doing it. What I find interesting is that there were expectations of outrage by Soviets, because when U-2 flew over Russia, remember they shot the U-2 plane. Khrushchev at the United Nations took the shoe off from his foot and started banging. So everybody would expect that the Russians would be really mad. Well, what happened is that they didn't react at all. Soviet reaction was muted to the surprise of White House. Nobody believed that they would not react. And Russia did not, Soviet Union did not disclose the incident for 6 years. They kept it a secret from their own people. And so why? Here's why they kept quiet, to everybody's surprise. They were embarrassed at home and abroad to admit loss of a nuclear-tipped sub, as they would be. Anybody would be. They were embarrassed of their inability to locate the lost submarine and the superior capability of the US to not only locate it, but to recover it. That would be crushing for them. And they were, of course, embarrassed at failure of Soviet intelligence to find the true purpose of Hughes deep ocean mining project during the 5-year deployment. They did not know what CIA was cooking for so long. So this is, I think I'm okay. I think they recovered 6 Russians deep in the ocean, and they gave them a formal funeral by dropping them to the sea. I think I read somewhere that they were put in special caskets because of radioactivity concern. Later on, maybe 20 years later, the Russians actually announced the names of the lost submarines and admitted to the loss of submarine, and even built a monument to the lost 98 people in a garrison, Vyuchyinsk. Kind of typical Soviet architecture. I would, if nobody told me where it come from, I would right away say it's Russia's architecture. Have you ever heard of Glomar response, glomerizing? Anybody? I bet you not. That's an interesting story too. There were very many requests for information under the Freedom of Information Act, many of them. And CIA always inconsistently said, we can neither confirm nor deny. And that it was taken to court, and apparently court sided with CIA too. Since then, you can even see now occasionally Glomar response or glomerizing means I cannot tell you. I cannot confirm or deny. That means to glomarize. Okay, I am on time. That's very good. And I'll change my position here for the third part of the 3. And that's a sad part, actually. You will want to cry, perhaps. It was Time magazine was especially obsessed with magazine. I think he was on the cover of Time magazine maybe 10 times or so. And here we have to see him with his spruce grouse, and this is presumably what he looked like. Howard Hughes exclusive, His Secret Life. And this is two more from the first cover of Time magazine, The Hughes Affair, and The Hughes Legacy, Scramble for the Billions. This is what he looked like when he locked up himself in a hotel, St. Dunes in Las Vegas, and just did not want to see anybody. And one more also from Time magazine, The Hughes Mystery, from his young age through all his, and finally question mark, because in the last several years he was totally invisible. He was sick, really, and the magazine summarized it quickly by saying that he was an American businessman, magnate. He was an investor, aviator, aerospace engineer, filmmaker, and a philanthropist. He gave away a lot of his wealth as well. And at that time, he was one of the wealthiest people in the world. He was a good man, basically, very, very good man. Later years, that's a sad story. He never shaved. His fingernails, it looks like it was a couple of inches, actually. I think, really, to tell you truthfully, I'm not sure that this is not a fake pictures, because how could you have a finger that is 2 inches long? That seems impossible. But that's what I got from somewhere, but I'm warning you that it's a possibility. He became a recluse, disliked being a public figure, and that affected his whole life. He moved to Las Vegas in 1966, locked himself up in Desert Inn Hotel, and when hotel tried to threaten to evict him, he slipped a note under the door saying, "I'm buying this hotel." And he, in fact, bought several hotels and 6 casinos in Las Vegas. He was rich enough to be able to do that. After that, hardly a single person saw him. He became so reclusive, he just never left the hotel for several years. He bought Las Vegas TV station. Why? So he could watch movies into late night, and if he fell asleep, he just called the station and asked to replay the movie so he can see the part that he missed. Part of his strange behavior. Had an air purifier installed in his car with sealed windows, and it cost more than the whole car itself. And he became obsessed with communist threat in early 1990s and wrote many articles in the paper about how bad communism is. He ate the same dinner. I'm overdoing it, but it's kind of interesting. He ate the same dinner all the time. Triple glass of tomato juice, a salad, thin steak, and coffee. That was his dinner. He insisted that his personal assistants be Mormons. Why? Because they don't drink alcohol. He had aversion to black people. He didn't like the blacks. He was anti-Semite, however, and obsessed with communism during the McCarthy era. Different personality. You don't hear often about people like that. His crazed behavior possibly caused a brain damage from a series of flying accidents. He broke his ribs, his arms, and I think he crushed his head as well. And he suffered greatly in the last few years. Okay. Became known for dramatic eccentricity, extremely germophobic, refused to hand to shake hands with people. Instead, insisted that anything handed to him be wrapped in tissues, for instance. And, he had long hair and fingernails, and he wore Kleenex boxes instead of shoes. I actually suspect, but I'm not sure, that this may be fabricated picture. Doesn't seem realistic. But you cannot tell nowadays what's real, what's not. So I'm showing it to you. Final years, likely had brain damage from the series of accidents. He had broken legs and ribs and fractured skull. Obsessive compulsive syndrome, some people say. Chronic pain, drug abuse, he used morphine. And of course, the fact that he was so isolated didn't help. Post-mortem x-rays revealed 4 broken hypothermic needles in his body. He was using codeine because he was in such great pain. He was 6'4", handsome guy, and he became a frame of 90 pounds at death. Hair and nail had grown freakishly long, and he was apparently unrecognizable at the age of 70. So much so, I think the next one shows you here. Well, he died in 1976 aboard an airplane, flying to a hospital in Houston. And you know what? No one was even sure that it was really Howard Hughes. The Treasury Department, anxious to get some money from him, had to use fingerprints to confirm that it was Howard Hughes and not somebody else. Isn't that sad? He left, he did not leave any will. And there were terrible fights over his fortune that lasted years and years and years. And that's worthy of another topic. It's pretty unbelievable too. So there was so-called Mormon will that created a lot of problems. There were several fake wills that emerged. Most famous was the so-called Mormon will. And I would tell you the story how that started, but I think I better not. It was declared after many years of litigation. It was declared fake after many years of litigation. And the litigation was finally closed about 20 years ago. And the final saga with, okay, never mind. Finally, this is a picture from the New York Times, first page from New York Times, when the paper announced Howard Hughes dies during flight test, hospital, something or other, I cannot see from here. And this is what he apparently said, and this is so sad, actually. If you want to remember me, he said, I want to be remembered by only one thing, and that is that my contribution to aviation. He was very proud that he contributed so much to the aviation, many new things and so forth. Now, much of this information was taken from a book. By the way, there are so many fiction stories. I bet you there are several dozen of books about Project Azure and Howard Hughes. And it's interesting reading, really. This is probably the best book. It's called Project the CIA and the Raising of the K-129. Showing this one shows pretty well the door here. You see that opens, and the door here, it just opens up, and this contraption goes inside here to sail away. So that is it. That's the closing slide. I want you to notice something. This comes from the Washington Post, January 19-something. And Howard Hughes was known to have apparently said, once you stop learning, you start dying. And he also said, never miss a Keese school lecture. He signed it, Albert Einstein. Okay, well, thank you.
You take some questions?
Of course, 15 minutes questions, or as long as you wish. Not that I can answer them all.
Wait for a mic. Use the microphone.
Did he have children? Did he have children? Was
Oh.
that part of the will?
You know, I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say I should know that I don't know. He had 2 wives, both divorced him, I know that, but I don't know that he had any children. I don't want to misinform you. Any other questions?
How worried are we supposed to be about the nuclear content of these submarines?
I knew that would be a problem. You know, I have a hearing problem a little bit. But could you repeat the question again for me?
I'm sorry. How concerned are we to be about the nuclear content of these failed Russian submarines, Soviet submarines?
You mean how large were the missiles?
No, well, just the fact that they're lying around on the bottom of the ocean with nuclear material.
Are they still a threat?
Well, they may be. You see, we don't know what happened because much of the information is still classified. So we don't know whether the missiles were actually retrieved or not. And nobody knows that, and you will not know for a long time until the whole document is declassified. At the very beginning of that report from CIA, they did say that much of the information is not available. It's still classified. Oh, I cannot tell you whether were recovered or not.
My question is,
No? They were not recovered?
No children. Howard Hughes had no children.
Oh, okay, thank you. Howard Hughes had no children.
my question is, did they recover one or more of the missiles? When they, I know they couldn't get the whole submarine. Did they recover any of the missiles?
No, they did not recover any of the missiles. It's not really known. They may have, but you would never know that because they would not acknowledge that they got the missiles. It's possible that they did. You see, they recovered about one third of the submarines, about 1/3 the bow, the front. And the missiles usually are in the back when they are fired. So you can speculate, but that's all you can do. They will not tell you that yet.
I noticed there's a big hole in the bottom of the capture vehicle as the submarine comes up from the bottom of the ocean. How come water didn't rush into that big hole?
How come Russians?
The water didn't rush into the big hole in the bottom of the capture vehicle? You know, when the doors opened and the submarine was brought up from the bottom?
Well, that was the whole purpose of the operation, so they can grab it deep into the ocean, bring it up, and hide it inside of a huge cavern at the bottom of the ship. Then the door would close, and nobody would know anything.
But
You
no
could not-
water came in when they opened that?
I'm sorry, what? Why? I no longer can lecture. This is very
floated,
sad
George.
because I cannot answer, I cannot hear the question. Can you repeat the question for me?
I think she's all set.
All right. Could you see me after the lecture, please? I'll answer your question. Thank you.
Ships of that nature are designed to allow the water to come up to the height that the ship displaces. In other words, it wouldn't flood the ship. It would only come up to a certain height in the bay that they captured the submarine in. Many ships of that type have been designed for retrieving objects with the doors open at the bottom of the ship.
Many ships are designed that way, really? I never heard of that.
They've recovered other things, salvage ships, for example.
Okay,
Think of an
that's
interview.
entirely possible. At the time when this was done, it was a novel idea, apparently extremely expensive, and specialized equipment was used, including the pipe, which had several hundred pieces of flexible steel, kind of like a line that was very thick and flexible, again, because of the movement of the ocean and things. So what you say, I'm sure is right, but this was all specially built with extreme expense.
You mentioned the U.S. ship, the Swordfish. Did they know when the sub went down, and did we find out about the sub going down before the Russians announced it?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I never mentioned Swordfish, but Swordfish was lowered to the bottom of the ocean where the submarine sank to take many pictures and examine it and take 22,000 photographs from every side, from which they could construct three-dimensional picture of the submarine. And when they knew, they had to know that because they knew exactly, they had to know how to grab it, whether it's smashed as it was or damaged in some way, and if it was damaged, they wanted to know how it was damaged so could grab it successfully. That was Swordfish, I think. Any other questions?
Thank you, George. That's very
Thank you.
interesting. A lot of mystery still involved in all that.
Oh, now they're the test, however. I
Oh,
promised.
Okay. So I'll see George afterwards, see how you score. Okay, so we're doing the whole semester here in Roseboro Theater.
Jeez, my knee is hurting.
Our Thursday event is a music event. The title is The Violin Favorites by Shu-Ting Tsai. And she'll be accompanied on the piano by Hushai Yai. They will present a concert featuring a diverse selection of violin music, which showcases the instrument's emotional depth. The program includes adoration, meditation, the Vagabonds, and others highly respected violin works. The event will be hosted by Kate Harrison here on Thursday at